Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is your brother Asar M. Hotep. Today is Monday, July the 20th, 2020. And we are starting the week a little early but full of great information and very excited for today's conversation. We've been, waiting on this conversation for a minute, and so we finally got it together, and here we are today. I have a very special guest, Dr. Abdul Karim Bangura out of Sierra Leone, and we're going to delve a bit into, his life, his education, and some of the many topics and interests for which he is known. And so there's just no way we're going to be able to, delve into everything. But I hope you are inspired by this individual in the way that I have been since I got word of him some years ago. And as always, I like to shout out everyone who is listening live. And of course, peace and blessings and love to all of you who are listening in the archive. And, we have a few people who have made themselves known in the chat. So peace to Emmanuel Adama, peace to Bantu Mandinka, Don Williams, Pamela Green Moore, SE44, and Millie Love. And I haven't checked over here on the Facebook front, but all of those who are listening, live on Facebook, I'd like to thank you as well. So as always, please like and share the video. The more you like and the more you share and comment on the videos, the more these conversations get traction, via the algorithms of these particular search engines and things of that nature. Well, more so when you share these conversations, more and more people get to know of these amazing guests, who have blessed us, with their wisdom and experience, on this platform. So much love to each and every one of you who are doing that. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest. He's been waiting patiently. And here we go. Thank you, Dr. Bangura, for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me on your show. You're great. I've seen some of your past shows. So impressed.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Some years ago, I'm writing a book called Religious Proselytization as a Form of Violence. And, there's a segment of it where I'm talking about, Ubuntu and just researching Ubuntu. One of your works on Ubuntu Goji, had come up. And so, reading that particular article, that was my first introduction, saying to you. And a little bit after that, I, had the privilege of actually physically meeting you at the Sheikh Anta Diop conference in Philadelphia, where you was given an award for a particular article. I forgot the name of the award, but that inspired me to get a couple of your books. To started off with the From Bones, the From Computers or From Bones to Computers, dealing with the mathematics, and then later on the one dealing with Toyin Falola, and some other things. And so I didn't really understand how extensive your body of work was, and how I would need a grant to get all of your books, over time. So we're going to get into that, a little later. But for those who aren't familiar with you, you know, and besides that, if you ever look up Dr. Bangura, one of the first things that's going to stand out is his extensive education. And so an individual who has 3 master's degrees and 5 PhDs. And so that seems just, astronomical unto itself. So, just give us a little background of where you're from, your and how you have grown into the interest that you're known for, and then kind of lay out for us what those degrees are in terms of the subject matter.
Wow. I'll begin with a name. And this individual is called Malcolm X.
Hmm.
Was little and somebody brought his autobiography. And I got curious, start reading this prince, this African prince, his strength, his thirst for knowledge. And I said, this is the greatest African that has ever lived in our times.
Hmm.
Most of the great ones, Cheikh Anta Diop and others, had the opportunity to go to great schools. The Martin Luther King, who have done TV shows on, and I also revere, had the opportunity to go to this great school. But this is a man that had nothing, and to go to prison to educate himself and read extensively, not just one discipline. This is one thing we don't talk about. Malcolm X's vast knowledge of various disciplines, what the great Cheikh Anta Diop would call pluridisciplinary. While Malcolm X did not get degrees, but it's knowledge base of African history, it's knowledge base of the sciences of history. When you start listening to read his speeches and read some of his writings, you say, how can this man who did not have the privilege of most of us was able to know so much? That was my first inspiration. And then I learned from that day on, whenever the white brother and sister start calling any African leader a troublemaker, it is because that particular African stood up and fought for his people. And the more I started reading about Malcolm X and all the things that we have said about him, I saw the same parallels with other Africans. When I use the word African, I'm not into this foolishness, African American, Black, this, continental. When I say African, we are all Africans. Like Peter Tosh said. So I do not have these distinctions. wherever you are, as Peter Tosh said, as long as you are a black man, you're an African, black in the very general sense of the meaning. So I then said, how would I mimic this man? How would I mimic the ancient Egyptian who did not study one discipline? Like your name, Imhotep. He who
Mhm.
peace. Anybody who knows about Imhotep know that this was a pluridisciplinarian, engineering, law, theology, you name it. They did not have all of this segmented discipline. They just studied. They went, sat down at the feet of great guru like some of us did when Dr. Ben was alive. We go to his living room, we sit down on the floor and just listen. When Dr. Ben speaks, we don't say anything. We just listen, we take notes because that was wisdom being imparted to us. Some of us learned and studied in those kind of traditional ways. And then I said, well, the only way I can even come close to this great mind, these great giants, is to take the opportunities that are available from the Western academia. That is,
Mhm.
going to different disciplines. So I knew that why political science, where I started, was of course from the European perspective was the first science, but there was something just not there. It wasn't enough. I began to say, what about linguistics? Because that's where everything begins, the mother tongue, and that's why we begin to revere mothers, that they are really the first teachers, and that's what I started off with in Ubuntu Goji.
Mhm.
Mothers being the first teachers. From cradle to the grave, they are always there. That's why we say mother tongue, we don't say father tongue. That's why we say mother smarts, we don't say father smarts.
Mhm.
It's that for us to understand real knowledge, we have to go back to the originators of knowledge. That's why the book Africa Mathematics from Bones to Computer, we know it was the women who used bones to carve out all those numerical values that we now cherish today as algorithms and all of those great things. So it meant that I have to understand what the African woman was thinking. I had to understand where she was coming from, why she is this original thinker. She's the original person that gave us knowledge. And in order to do that, it means they have to really stretch yourself to know some mathematics, go to computer science, because again, the binary code is what is behind the brain of the computer. And who began divination? It was women, the African woman, that began binary divination before the men stole it and took it and started making money. So we have to, again, go back to our great mothers, our great sisters, and say these women had tremendous knowledge from the word go. That's why when we talk about mathematics, nobody equals Hypatia, the great Egyptian woman mathematician. Nobody ever in history has equaled her in terms of mathematics and equations and all that. So there's something great about going back to all of these different disciplines and then say, this is where it begins, and this is where we should invest more of our resources to really get rid of this marginalization of women, because they are really the backbone, not only economic, but also of knowledge, until, especially on the motherland, until we get rid of this foolishness of marginalizing our women in terms of knowledge gain, then we are going to remain at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to development.
Hmm. Indeed. So you had mentioned, uh, Malcolm X and his multidisciplinary education, self-education, so to speak. And I remember it was and I can't remember the documentary, but the individual who he went to jail with, who they were robbing, or whatnot. They said that when they went into jail, they would not. They made a pact that they would not come out as ignorant as when they came in, and so he studied uh, mathematics. He studied philosophy. Of course, he studied theology, but he studied the sciences and Egyptology, if I remember correctly. It was a wide, broad range things, and of course political science. And so that's back in the day when all these types of books and things were allowed, in the prison system. And so, and then when you think about we know that he was in the Nation of Islam, and so that Elijah Muhammad, had a great impact on his life in his continued studies. But people don't realize, like, later on in his life, the impact that John Henry Clark, had, and the relationship that they had in their studies. And so it brings me to this question of, and just to give some insight for those who are not familiar. So he has an MA, and I'm talking about Dr. Bangura here, an MA in International Studies, an MA in Social Sciences, an MS in Linguistics, and then you get into the PhD for Linguistics and Political Science, another one in Development Economics, another one in Computer Science, and another one in Mathematics. This takes a certain level of discipline and study. And so, like, Malcolm X was real keen and focused on the types of study and how to integrate it in a way that when he has conversations with the lay people, that it resonates with them. And you have a couple of books on research methodology and things of that nature. So I wanted to know, like, what was your regime, like, what was your motivation to accomplish all of those things? What kept you focused, and how did you take notes? So a lot of us are struggling, with family life and all of this, and we want to study all these texts, but we get easily distracted. But what are some tips for us? How did you do it? So that we can utilize strategies in which you did, just even if we're not working towards a degree, that we have that interdisciplinary and research focus. What are some of those things that you did to accomplish what you did?
Well, one of the things uh, a person who wants to gain knowledge has to do is what, of course, my background quite a bit. I come from the Abrahamic traditions. I'm a Muslim. I attended the Roman Catholic school, so I served Mass as an altar boy. So I know my Bible from beginning to end and to beginning. Matter of fact, I won so many prizes in Bible knowledge when I was a young man. Now they asked me to be an altar boy. That's how interesting it was. And when I got to Italy, in order to make ends meet, we used to go to these synagogues for change and food and stuff like that. And I got curious. I started talking to Rabbi Eliotov and Senino, and they said, "Are you interested in Judaism?" I said, "Sure, I'm Abrahamic." And then I started studying Judaism under them. And one of the things all three of the Abrahamic faiths insist on is knowledge. Gaining knowledge, the Abrahamic faiths tell us that when you gain knowledge, it's a path to self-fulfillment, it's a path to avoid getting into crazy things, it's a path to ask some of the vexing questions that other people just want to sweep under the rug. And in fact, in Islam, haq al-ilm is not just gaining knowledge, but knowledge is a human right in Islam. You have the right to gain knowledge. That's why sometimes I smile when I see the literacy rates of women in many of these Muslim countries is so patriarchal. That is not Islam, because Islam even insists that the woman have 50-50 rights. One of those rights is haq al-ilm, the right to education, the right to inheritance, the right for her to keep her last name without changing it, and the right for her to have equal share of resources in the family, and the right for her also not to even contribute a dime to the house expenses. It is the man's responsibility. Now it is from our own volition if she wants to pitch in. But this idea, when I go to Muslim countries, I give lectures and hear some of these sort of stories, and I say, wow, geez, these cultures have not really imbibed what the great Abrahamic faiths are teaching us. It's the same thing also in our own Christian families, in our own Christian home, because you know the Banguras are both all over the place. We had one uncle who was the bishop of the American Methodist Episcopal Church, a diocese in Sierra Leone, and another uncle who was the chief imam of the Muslims in the country. So we have been blessed in a family, whereas the Abrahamic faiths are so intertwined. It's magic. So I'm a little bit fortunate in that respect, that allowed me to develop a sense of what it is that is important, what it is that we really have to strive to achieve in our life. And how did these disciplines come? As I said, I follow my prince, the African prince Malcolm X, very well. And one of the disciplines we forgot to mention about Malcolm X, he was also a self-taught historian. He knew African history so well that this is a man that had no MA, BA, PhD, but went to Oxford and challenged the so-called citadel of education and was able to hold his own. And at the end of it, even the big kahunas at Oxford stood up and gave him a round of applause for his vast knowledge and the way he was able to handle himself in such, at the time, a hostile intellectual environment for him. They thought, oh, this guy was just an African-American, Black American, they called him in those days, who was just making noise in the US, now coming here to the citadel of the highest learning in the Western world and really taking them to task. This is a great, 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 great inspiration. And I'm glad you mentioned Ubuntu Goji. Interestingly, there's not a country on earth where people populate, so that means take away Antarctica, except you visit, where Ubuntu Goji has not been cited or quoted, and not many times, not even once. So this is a work that really was inspirational. And that means that sometimes we have to also stand up, especially in our own institutions, in our own Black communities, to say when something is real, we should not allow our own people to marginalize it. I did take a lot of heat at Howard University for Ubuntu Goji. I did take a lot of heat at Howard University for African mathematics. I did take a lot of heat at Howard University for fractal complexity in Black thinkers. Because for them, if you did not stick to the Eurocentric methodologies and way of doing things, there was something wrong with what we are doing in your repertoire. But I took it in stride. I struggled with it and got the beating and the pins and pegs, because there was a white methodologist who was opposed, and unfortunately, some of our own Black cheers were pretty much in support of this perspective. They didn't want to hear anything about African-centered research methodology, so these are just romanticizing Africa. But when African mathematics won the Curry Prize, this is the top prize in academia, and then other books began to follow, and they began to learn that this is very strange. You find out that more white people are reading these African-centered books and are quoting and citing this African-centered book than our own people, our own students, our own colleagues. So what I had to do was to aggressively also work with CODESRA, the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa. And we came up with a handbook on conducting research and mentoring students in Africa. Whereas we have all the Eurocentric methodologies, and we show their limitations, and we say they are not bad, they have limitations, but they can be finessed to address certain African issues. But we also made sure that this handbook had African-centered methodologies because credential works are free of charge. People can access them. They don't have to buy, they don't have to pay for anything. And believe it or not, the last metrics of metadata mine shows that the book has been out for only less than 2 years, but it has been downloaded by 360,000 individuals. And again, unfortunately, most of the people who are downloading them are in Eastern Europe, in Asia, in Western Europe, and other places. So we have to be aggressive in getting the word out that we have good works that our own people have to look at. Now, if you read or you look at them and you're not happy, then give us feedback. Maybe we can do better the next time around. And that is how I think we have to really go about this. And there's no reason why your books, for example, which are out there, why our people are not really buying more of these books. That we have to struggle to get them to read these books, and we have to just do a better job to make sure the word goes out. That's why shows like this are really a blessing, in that we can talk about some of our works, and we can also say, hey, if we don't take ourselves very seriously, nobody else is going to take us seriously. And we have to stop this foolishness that here I was at Howard, somebody complained, why am I using some of my texts for courses? Well, if the book, I'm not going to use a book that is irrelevant to a course, but if the book is relevant to a course, I will use it for my textbook in a course. But it was a big deal. But they have no problem if I use all Eurocentric or white folks' books in the course. They're happy with that. But then here we go to the University of Michigan, Michigan State University, even Harvard are using the same books they were poo-pooing at Howard. So it's sometimes flabbergasting that the European universities were using my books, but at Howard, now it's a problem for me to use, for example, the methodology books that I have been writing. So sometimes it's really very confusing to many of us who want to make sure that our knowledge does not become sidelined and does not become marginalized when we ourselves are the ones that fight against that particular knowledge.
I forgot. So the people are saying that when I talk, there's feedback. So hold on. Testing. So if I just muted our guest mic. So for those who are listening in the chat, is there still feedback while I'm talking right now? I know there's going to be a gap in the time. So if you are listening in the chat right now and you can hear me clearly, just say so in the chat and let me know that I'm good. Okay. So what's happening is, while your mic is on and I'm talking, is giving them feedback on the reel. So when I ask my question, I'm going to mute your mic. And then when I'm done, I'm going to mute my mic and then unmute yours. And then, you can continue the conversation. But I want to get back to specifically, the strategies that you use, in terms of focus. Like, what was that process in terms of knowledge? And then I'm gonna come back with a question regarding the importance of science, to liberation, because you deal with a lot of works just in science in general. So, so I'm gonna get back there, and then I'm gonna come back with that second question. Your mic is unmuted. You good?
Okay, what's the question? And several.
Oh, the question was, in terms of the the research strategies, for the disciplines that you use. What are some tips for those who want to absorb, and who aren't necessarily focused on a PhD, but they want to absorb this information, and internalize it and to be able to utilize it in their own lives. What strategies do you suggest, for people who are in the we call it the Independent African Academy. So Malcolm X, was one of those members in the Independent African Academy that wasn't, a part of an institution, but this lifelong learning, was a part of their pedigree. So, what are some strategies that we can use to better, align ourselves and get serious about the study of just various different topics?
You have to use several different strategies in order to gain knowledge, not only of ourselves, but knowledge in general. First, do not be a stranger to the archives. There are many things in the archives that, if they are to our advantage, that many of the European scholars are not going to focus on or write about. But there are. When you go to the National Archives, the one at College Park and in Upper Marlborough, you'll be amazed at the abundant amount of information that are there. But you have to be careful with those archival material, because the people who wrote them, of course, were Europeans. Most of them were written by Europeans. And that's how our first book on African research techniques, African Studies and Research Methodology, the exact title, came about when I became a member of the African Studies Association in the late 80s. When I go to conferences, well, the majority of the members, of course, are historians. So, of course, you expect most of the panels and discussions to be dominated by them. This is just normal. But they always beat their chest about archival material. That's where their research is kosher. Any other approaches or methodologies were poo-pooed. Well, these are just techniques. How can you really be sure when there is no physical evidence? But then when you study linguistics, you begin to realize that what is in the archives are the reflection or the thinking or the perception of the people who wrote those original documents and put them there. So even concepts, even words, even the onomatopoeia that Europeans use in writing archival material have their own biases. For example, if it happened in Africa, it happened in the jungle. If it happened in Europe, it happened in the forest. So even the onomatopoeia tells you something different. If it is in Africa, they're engaging in tribal warfare. If it is in Europe, they were engaged in ethnic cleavages. So even the way they write the documents can taint how you understand them, how you read them. So those of us who study linguistics, we are able to argue with the historians that maybe this archival material with your chest on is not all what it cracked up to be. That's when we wrote our first book. I organized 2 panels, 2 subsequent years on research methodology and African study, brought some folks that wrote papers in 1991 and 1992, and the book was published by University Press of America. And we began to show, contrary to popular belief, that even though, yes, there are data paucity, there are limitations in what we have, but we can still study Africa and Africans systematically with other more sophisticated or challenging methodology. And the book was very successful. It did very well for the press, and it was well cited. It was well mentioned in many intellectual circles, and a lot of reviews were written about the book. So we're happy with that. That is the first book that I remember really began to deal with how we study Africans from different systematic perspectives, even though they were Eurocentric approaches, but we are able to finesse those approaches to bring out the Africanness in us. Second, we cannot do serious research without talking to our people in the what we call the hood. There is a great deal of knowledge, there's a great deal of savvy, there's a great deal of information in our neighborhoods, in our communities that never see the pages of most of our books. So what I started to, and this is the point I made in Ubuntu Goji, we have to go back to the people who are uncertified to teach us, those of us who are certified, because they have vast knowledge that we can never know if we don't talk to them. We cannot have indigenous knowledge if we don't go talk to the people who do not have this certificate, these degrees, because they are really the incubator. These are the carriers of the culture. They are there, they see things, they know things, and they know the realities of what is going on. So we need to really integrate them in the knowledge production process. And third but not the least is that no matter what we do, we have to go back to the sources, the original sources. Just like you do in your research and I do in many of my research, we have to go back to the ancients. We have to go back, what were the Keynesians thinking about these things? We have to go back to what were those South Africans thinking when they were making all of those things that we're now discovering, that this was the first chemistry, this was the first physics. We have to go back to the ancient women in Eastern Africa. What were they thinking when they were designing these fractals thinking process that was going on? What were they thinking when they were doing divination, sand divination, the Okokwe divinations, and all of those great things? We have to go back to those original sources so that we can focus, we can center our knowledge processes within a more complete pluridisciplinary framework. If not, we are going to miss the boat big time.
Indeed, indeed. So, we have some strategies now on what to look for, sources to go. And, I want to get your response to something. And in terms of the use of science in African liberation. And so, another great student of the African Independent Academy was Marcus Garvey. And let me go here. Okay. So in a speech in the early 19 was it 20s or 30s, I copied, I heard the speech and I transcribed the speech, and I want to, hopefully you can read it on your screen, but I'll read it now. He says, "Dive down, black men, and dig. Reach up, black men and women, and pull all nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything, north and south, east and west. And then when ye have wrought well, you would have inherited God's blessings. You would have become God's chosen people. Naturally, you'll become leaders of the world because of the superiority of your mind and your achievements. The world is indebted to us for the benefits of civilization. They stole our arts and sciences from Africa. Then why should we be ashamed of ourselves? And out of our own creative genius, we make ourselves what we want to be. Follow always that great law." And then it continues. "There is no height that which you cannot climb without the active intelligence of your mind. Mind creates as much as we desire in nature. We can have through the creation of our minds, but in your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher developments of science to your children and make sure that we have a race of scientists par excellence. For in science lies our only hope to withstand the evil designs of modern materialism. And this is from a speech, Look for Me in the Whirlwind, 1924, in Harlem. And so you seem to focus, a good part of your scholarship on, the sciences of Africa. And I think I read somewhere in a previous interview of yours the influence of Sheikh Anta Diop, in your work. So I wanted to just get your thoughts on what Marcus Garvey said, and how important was Sheikh Anta Diop and what he was doing to what you're doing. Do you consider yourself in that lineage of Diop, and why is that science and multidisciplinarity important for not only your work but just in general?
Science, the systematic way of teasing out knowledge. And we know our ancestors began science. You've written about it yourself, so I'm not going to sit here and preach. I'm quite sure our audience already know that. So we'll spend, that's a whole show in itself. But in a nutshell, just as you said, the great Marcus Josiah Garvey preached, so did Cheikh Anta Diop also preached, that we have to save ourselves. We have to take our rightful place, that which we originated, and that which is what is shaping the world as we know it today, and will be so for generations to come. We have to be serious in our institutions, in our schools, even in our own private little ways, to make sure that this generation and those to come really don't run away from the sciences. So imagine how thrilled I was that 5 African American sisters went to the University of Michigan. They started their PhD in engineering, and they made a bond. We will share together, we will study together, we will work together, but we have to show University of Michigan that Black women and Black men are up to the task of being in the leading fields of engineering, of the sciences. And this year, as we say in our Black church, hallelujah, all 5 sisters graduated with their PhD in engineering at the University of Michigan, became the most diversified of higher science education in the United States of America. That for me was a victory. It was a victory because these were sisters who said that we may not have much to give. We may not have the notoriety or the attention and all that, but we are committed to make sure that all of us graduate on time and to set a record at that university. And across the country, there's no place, no university that can boast of 5 wonderful, beautiful, great African sisters getting PhD in engineering, the sciences, the same year. And so some brothers heard this story earlier on at Harvard, but they were law school students. 21 of them, they made the same bond. And the class of 2021, the coming class of Harvard Law School, is going to be 21 brothers who started at the same time. None of them dropped out. They studied together, they worked together, they share hamburgers together, French fries, greasy French fries, when they can hardly afford anything, to make sure that they succeed at Harvard Law School. So again, these things will be mimicked. The more we talk about them, the more other people know what is going on. And this is how we are going to win. This is how we are going to win these challenges, this new war we face with. So a brother who was the best chocolatier in New York got fired many, many times. He couldn't understand why he was fired. He realized if I'm the best, one of the best chocolatiers, it must be because I'm black. He decided to what? I'm going to go to my family, extended family. We Africans, so it's not just your blood brother. I go to the extended family. That means the friend, what we call friend, the hood. And he said, give me $100. In 6 months, I'll give you $200. You give me $200, and they put in money. And this guy have one of the best chocolatiers company in New York today, hiring his own people. And what happened? Now, white folks want to buy his business because he was so successful. So this is how we are going. This is science. You see, we do not write this as science, but the systematic thinking of this brother to say, I can take steps, do this, do that, I'll reach to a certain goal. That is what science is all about. So his thinking, while he may not have realized this, is the systematic way, the scientific way of thinking and doing things. And today is one of the most successful chocolatiers in New York, if not the whole of America. So this is how we are going to win. Okay, other people have other strategies. Hallelujah, they can do their own strategies, but scientific thinking is the way to go. My most recent book, and when I finish, I'm going to send you an email, send me your address, I'll send it to you. Just came out, that is Branches of Asanteism. What I've done is I've gone beyond we just analyzing Mwalimu Molefi Kete Asante's work, and we talk about Afrocentrism, but within Asante's work was some serious scientific development that were taking place that many of us did not realize until I sat back and said, let me go back and look at what others have done to develop this guy's thinking. And the book just came out just last month, and I began first with a survey of his treatises of Afrocentricity to set the context. And then I saw that Ali Mazroui's own he called this Afrenaissance was possible because of the systematic way he dealt with Mwalimu Asante's thought process. And I look at Natambo's Pan-African nationalism approach. I looked at Professor Collins' Afrocentric feminist epistemology, Hudson Wim's Africana womanism theory. I look at Manzama's Afrocentric spirituality. I look at my own Ubuntu because the first excerpt in that paper was from the great Asante. And I looked at African mathematization, and I look at computational techniques, and I look at Shilley's African-centric organizational theory. I look at Shilley's African social work, practice paradigm, and social welfare philosophy and policy. And I look at Pellebon's on Asante-based Afrocentricity scale. It is unfortunate that I haven't seen any doctoral distinction or master's thesis from any of our own HBCUs that have used Pelebon's great scale that he developed by looking at Afrocentricity as Asante developed it to study our own people. But you go, you see all these papers, all these books written by white folks using this scale. For me, it was really mind-boggling. What is it? Am I missing? Am I someplace, somewhere? Why are we not encouraging our own students, our own scholars to really employ this great scale? I look at Miki. Miki, this is a Japanese American that have taken Afrocentricity to study Asian centricity and begin to show our connectedness between African people and Asians and their cultures. It's a fantastic work that have also reached many Asians, and these are work that are celebrated in Asia. Almost every country in Asia, they have conferences now where there are special panels on Asia centricity, and they always begin with the credit with Asante's work. And last but not least, I look at our great Baba Zakando, who wrote the greatest book on Malcolm X ever, The Assassinations of Malcolm X, with a small s, and where it talks about black consciousness epistemology. So here we have now, I hope, I have been able to write a book. It's a very big book, about 500 some pages, that the great uh, uh, press here in London, Maryland, published, Roman and Littlefield. And for me, I think if I did not contribute anything else in our knowledge of the great Molefi Kete Asante, I think I've done him justice. And I'm happy when he got a copy of the book, he sent me a beautiful email. He said, I appreciate the seriousness in which you have devoted to my work and my thought that nobody has ever done. I felt that we have to celebrate Afrocentricity in its scientific milieu. That is the only way we are able to duplicate and replicate what the great Molefi Kete Asante has given us. We cannot wait until he dies and give him all these eulogies. What good is it when he's already dead? His grave, he can't even hear them. He cannot even read them. So we have to celebrate, we have to canonize him and challenge those Eurocentric scholars. Including these Eurocentric scholars are not just white folks, by the way. We have few black folks that have tried to poo-poo the great Asante's work. And I hope this work will contribute to us shutting their mouths up.
Indeed, indeed. I'll definitely send you the address, and I look forward to reading it and promoting the text. And, you know, speaking of, I had mentioned, or you had mentioned earlier, you reading the text. For those who don't, know, he, the picture I'm showing on the screen now is a good brother in Brazil, who has my latest text. And Dr. Bangura, I was blessed to have him review one of the chapters on the African origins of the word science. And so, you can read that chapter in his text, Allusion Volume 2, China into Religion and Philosophy. But I want to, let me show the picture. I mentioned this text earlier because something that you just said reminded me of this. And so you wrote this one text, Toyin Falola and the African Epistemologies. And so I want you to give us a little background, a synopsis of who is this scholar and why did you decide to write about him? And if you can, what reminded me of him, of this particular text, and I have this text as well, is that you talk about how there had been other writers who had written about Toyin Falola, but given your unique education, none of you decided to approach his writings and to talk about the scientific character, and linguistic character, saying of his writings, which a lot of the other biographers and commentators weren't able to really kind of delve in. So why did you why was it necessary to approach it? And I see you kind of doing the same thing with Dr. Asante's saying work. Why is that framework very important in really extracting the essence of these scholars and their writings?
And Falola, as you know, is one of our great African historians. A matter of fact, one of the most published individuals I ever know. I thought I was running the race, but this guy is already 125 books and keep running away from some of us. So we appreciate him. As I said in the preface of the book, we were at a conference once, and he was sitting there with some of his friends, his colleagues. And I made a statement. I said, Toyin Falola is no historian. And Jesus used to see the room light up because this guy is known as a historian, foremost, celebrated, won all these awards, well known and all that stuff. And I waited 3 minutes. He was sitting there, his eyes were wide open and the other's mouth wide open. Why the hell did I say that? I said, now that you all have calmed down after 3 minutes, I said, this man is genesiologic. Genesiology means positive intuitive thinking. And that is what African science is. And if we go back to our history, no matter how difficult, no matter how challenging things are, we always believe that tomorrow things will get better. You go back to the great Negro spirituals, as they call them. I call them African American spirituals. And I wrote a book on that is published by Peter Lang. You hear, before I will be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. You hear kumbaya, my Lord. There is always this genealogy, this scientific thinking that if you follow certain steps, you do certain things, you will end up with a result that will pan out, that will pay what it is that you've paid the price for. And in the book, I said Harriet Tubman was a scientist. She was a scientist in the true sense of the word. How can a woman organize an underground railroad and endowed with certain songs that allow our people to leave the US of way and end up in Canada to gain freedom? And then you hear people saying in our great, I go to church, I still go to church because I love church. I love the music, I love the preaching, and sometimes I can get into it. I don't run away from the church. So I just don't go to the mosque, but I also go to my church regularly. And you hear they say, swing low, sweet chariot. Where the hell was the chariot on the plantation? You and I know they were saying what? Swing low, sweet Harriet. She was coming to carry me home. Our folks learned scientifically to what? To use what we call cognates. Chariot, Harriet, they are linguistic cognates. This takes a great deal of intelligence to fool the masters so they do not know Harriet was around the corner to take them home to freedom. So you begin to understand the deep scientific genealogical mind of the African. Our people were very smart. That's why while they were physically enslaved, they never allowed themselves to be spiritually, mentally enslaved. And that takes ingenuity, that takes strength, that takes purpose, that takes what we refer to as, Sekou Touré call it, genesiology. And again, what I did in Toyin Falola was to demonstrate that this great guy, his historical works were embedded, we are situated in many scientific processes that we did not see until you begin to look at it from a pluridisciplinary perspective. That's the only way you can tease them out. But I was not only satisfied about it, I wrote a follow-up, which you may not know about, that came out about 4 months ago. And that is what is titled Falolizing the Epistemologies and Methodologies of Africana Knowledge, published by the North Carolina Academic Press. And in that, I look at, again, many of the methodologies from ancient Egypt all the way to the present, but now situating his own historical works, his own works, and how he used this work and how we can follow how he did things and peg our work in these great African methodologies. I looked at quickly REC methodology, Ucha and Uhem, Bessel methodology, Egyptological methodology, archaeoastronomical methodology. Many people did not know archaeoastronomy is our invention. They usually give it to all these Europeans. Hermeneutics, many people don't know hermeneutics. The Trazacaros was really Egyptian, black, not even the light skin, dark skin Egyptian. Griot methodology, Sankofa methodology, Pan-African methodologies, multiplex methodology, pluridisciplinary methodology, Ubuntu Goji methodology, Ethiopian intercultural relations methodology, Ethiopian restoration of African historical consciousness methodology, African mathematization, complex methodology, Mo Ibrahim African-centered index methodology, African-centric methodology, R.S. Shun, Tut methodology, and Ujama methodology, Abiodun Oriki. These Orikis that they are so much embedded in scientific methods and approaches. And last but not the least, consciences methodology, which the great Kwame Nkrumah gave us. So here we have our great thinkers have developed certain ways of looking at things, but we have to say, this is what they did. We have to now transcend what they did to say, how do we bring new light into this and looking at people who have done works that can allow us to mimic, to do similarly. And that, I think, if we do that, we are in great shape.
Now, you had mentioned earlier that you are a practicing Muslim, and you have a few texts, dealing with Islam, and you're part of these important dialogues about, peace in Africa or whatnot. So if you can kind of give us, a little background, on some of your texts focused on Islam and what they're about, and then the peace initiative. Why is that important? In this, saying for the development of Africa and the stability of Africa itself.
One thing is definite: you cannot develop, you cannot gain anything if you are constantly in war. You're constantly fighting, you're constantly killing one another. And this is one thing that saddens me, in fact, even in our own African communities in the US. We have to stop this foolishness of killing one another. Enough is enough of that. I cannot understand why we should kill. Just this year alone, almost 82 transgender Black females because they decide to practice different sexual lifestyle. You may not approve, you may not agree, but there is no reason for anybody to kill somebody because they decide this is the lifestyle they are going to follow. So what I've tried to do in most of my Islamic work is that we had problems in the Islamic community. We cannot deny them. But we also have to go to the teachings. It's not accidental that the Quran has 52 times that the concept of peace have come up with surahs, that is verses, that preach against them. We have to say, what are the sources teaching us for us to develop certain discipline, certain understanding to avoid some of the crazy things that we sometimes do to ourselves. We cannot allow imams who are half educated most of the time because they did not study the whole fiqh or did not go to the Al-Azhars and the other academies to study, to preach very, very dangerous preaching in some of our communities because they themselves, many of them, I'm not saying all of them, some of them are very bright, they study and all that, but many of them are ignorant. We have to be honest about this. So they try to interpret some of these things verbatim. And those of us who are blessed to know a little bit more, I believe it's our duty to step up to say, hey, we can write, we can travel to I do a lot of training workshops of imams and people in government, journalists that they bring from the Middle East to the US. We train them to understand. There's no reason why any Muslim country should have any problem with human rights. Because not only are the 22 covenants of the international human rights are in the Quran, but there are over 200 more that the world is not even ready to deal with. Because the right for you to take care of your parents, the right for you to treat your wife equally, for you to take the garbage out without question, for you to even learn how to cook in the home and all that. The Prophet did that. If we leave half of the things the Prophet lived, we wouldn't have many of the problems we have in many of our Islamic countries. And some of us who are bold enough to go to many of these countries and talk about these things, they may frown. Some of them may frown when we say them, but later on, they realize that the truth is just the truth. And that is why I said in the great in my work to the great Molife Asante, it's just a short passage if I may read it. I say, seeing is mutual, looking is spontaneous, and noticing can be incidental to both. Paying attention must be voluntary. Examining requires attention, and analysis demands sustained attention. While earlier African thinkers set standards, we must extend insights to problems they did not discuss. The extent to which we can agree, disagree, or puzzle by any contemporary work on Africa and African people should be a measure of its achievement. And I said, thank the Creator that Molife Asante started the provocative discourse. It is our job to continue it.
And lastly, and before we end the program, if any of you who are listening live have a question for our guest, please type it in the chat room, and I will be sure to ask, and we'll get your questions answered. But I think you're at 100 books published, or close to that, and probably over that now. So it's just going to be impossible for us to go down saying the gamut of that, and then the articles and things you've written as well. But I want to kind of focus in on this aspect. You mentioned one of the recent books that you just published in terms of the knowledge coming from ancient Egypt onto the present, and with you being a native of West Africa, matter of fact, the farthest West Africa, there are some people in our community who question the value of studying ancient Egypt if we ourselves are West Africans, and question why should we be interested? What do we have to learn from ancient Egypt? And they believe that we have no relationship to ancient Egypt at all. And I want to get your opinion on that, or just some insights on why is ancient Egypt important in this work, and understanding it, and then what's the relation to your knowledge with the rest of Africa, especially West Africa.
Well, we have to continue learning, and what you and I share is the love for hieroglyphics. You love hieroglyphics just as I do. That's one of the reasons I admire you a lot. And you send your works, and I look at them, and I share with you what I have, and you look at them and give feedback. We have to just continue to dig. When you talk about West Africa and ancient Egypt, how do we account for the language in Senegal to have so many words that are found in ancient Egyptian language? Anybody who does not understand that West Africa connection with Egypt are real, we need to keep working harder to make sure we bring more evidence to show that. Anybody who does not believe that the Yoruba of Nigeria, well, now we can say the Yoruba of the world, because everywhere now you go, there are Yorubas, especially in Latin America and other places. that they have so many practices, religious and other linguistic practices that are so related to what was happening in ancient Kemet. We have to do a better job in bringing more information so that people can see the West African, let's just say Africa south of the Sahara, especially West Africa, connections. If they by now people don't know the new Nubian race, that the original people of ancient Kemet, we are not these Greeks that came down and miscegenated and joined in and all of those Asians, but it was authentic, originally black like you and me. Then we have to do more work to bring more evidence. That means we have to go back and look at the great Benyokanon's own writings. So one thing people did, and I did this in Fractal Complexity, was to marginalize the great Benyokanon's great work. There's another book that is coming out soon. It's an edited book that I edited, where I now have situated the great Benyokanon's work of even the what we call Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, being that of ancient Egyptian and then West African and part of slightly North Africa. There is a lot, but again, as you and I know, we have to do a whole lot more work to flesh these things so people can see them visually, they can see them in writing, so they can, maybe the questioning can temper down. You're not going to get rid of all the people who are going to doubt what it is that we say, but the more evidence you bring, the more it is people will come to accept the truth. And that's all we can do, render the truth. And for many decades, people did not believe that we are here in the Americas before Columbus and all these people even came. Until now, we can show the Piri-Reis, we can show the Kotar Amir documents and all of these things to show that. I was driving one day from Baltimore and I was listening to the WEA radio, that is Morgan State University Radio. And one of these African-American gentlemen called the show is a show by Muslims in Baltimore. They come in every Sunday in the evening. And this man was determined to poo-poo what the people in the show were saying about the Islam, the African roots of Islam. That's why one of the most cited and most read article in ResearchGate and academia is my article on the African roots and transformation of Islam. And so I had to stop, pull over the road, and I called into the show. Because the man even said that all this word Allah, where these black people in America come with Allah, there's no such thing, it doesn't mean anything. And I was really stunned. But I was stunned not because I faulted him, it is because we have not done a good job to really give out the message. Had we thought that Hagar or Hajar, in the Quran, in the Bible is Hagar, in the Torah is Hagar, was from Egypt at the time when Egypt was completely black, dark skin. That's who Ishmael came from. And we know that the Kaaba, which Muslims turn to pray, was built by Abraham so that Ishmael and her mother can worship. If we had done that earlier, we show the connection in the Torah, in the Bible, and in the Quran, the continuation of this story, maybe people would not have been so doubtful. And we also know that in the Bible and the Torah, it made very clear to Abraham, Angel Gabriel came with a message from Allah, from God, that from you are there going to be two great nations, which Jesus Christ came from the Christianic, and then Ishmael came from the prophet, came from the Ishmaelites, which is what we call Islam today. So if we had done that work earlier on, the doubts would not have been. And then I have to say to the gentleman, I said, my brothers in the studio are not making up anything of Allah. Allah simply means God. I said, Jesus Christ himself called God Allah, because Jesus Christ's language, the Aramaic, The word for God in the Aramaic language is Allah. So Jesus Christ must not have been crazy to call God Allah. He did not have to make it up, because that was the language that he was brought up in. That's what he spoke. And then I said, so if you also go to the first translation of the Bible, hundreds of years ago, you see that the first page alone had the word Allah 5 times. So it's not like my brothers in the studios are making up anything. This is just the same word meaning what we say in the English language, God. So in so many words, you who came in peace, Imhotep, we have to do more work. We have to also go in, we cannot run away from our communities like most of our folks have done. When I go to Southeast, when I go to places and I engage them, I go to the schools, I go to the neighborhoods, I do something, I do it deliberately because they are even more serious to learn more. If you go to Baltimore, some of the most serious educational groups and discussions are taking part not in the rich places or not where blacks have done well, but in what we call the poorer or quote ghetto neighborhoods of the black community. So those Africans in Baltimore are much more politically and much more culturally astute than many people would understand. Just like Asante does in Philadelphia. Going to the matter of fact, many of the conferences, teachings, and symposiums are done in the neighborhoods, not in the big. Every now and then, because the conference has to take more people, there's no space. That's when it goes to those hotels. So we have to continuously engage our people in our neighborhoods. We cannot run away. And now you made a little bit of money, go buy a big mansion, $2 million house in PG County. We have to stay engaged. We have to keep working. Believe it or not, our people, they appreciate us even more than the people who will teach at our universities. Strange but true.
So our first question comes from Emmanuel Adama, and he asked, would you mind asking Dr. Bangura what books were indispensable to his development as a scholar?
Well, as I began, my first exposure to the truth was an autobiography by the great Malcolm X. It's a must read. You have to read all of the books by Chekanta Diop. From barbarism to civilization, you cannot run away from those books. You have to read the books by Dr. Ben. You have to read the books by Henry Clark. You have to read the books by Joe Cannon. Many of these books were self-published because the establishment, white and black, did not want to touch them. I can sit here and give you a list of books, but fortunately, there is a site that have put together the 40 greatest books of black contributions to civilization. If you Google with the name, you come to them. You cannot run away from Molefi Asante Afrocentricity because he allowed us to transition from the earliest thinkers to where we are today. You cannot run away from the writings of Marcus Garvey. You cannot run away from the writing of Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. These are works we cannot run away from. There are also certain literary works that we have to immerse ourselves in. It's unfortunate that we don't push these books, these works anymore, because now the reading interest is the book that talk about sex, about what I've done to be a celebrity, and how I was the wife of the president in the White House, and how I became strong. Now, I'm not poo-pooing these books. Maybe they should be read. But we have to go back and say, let's read and Akupa's work. We have to go back and say, let's read the earlier great women literarists in the Caribbean and in the United States. There is a great deal of value if we want to sharpen our acumen, we want to tell the story right, and also educate our children to be prepared for the battles ahead. Believe it or not, all these things we see now, police murdering our black men, Black Lives Matter, these are temporary things. Few months from now, you're not even going to hear about them. But the challenges and the bigger challenges that will come are ahead. And if we don't take this thing very seriously now, I begin to teach our young folks the value of what our great thinkers left us so that they can develop ourselves. They can be those 5 women that became great scientists. They can become those 21 brothers that are going to come out of Harvard Law School, the next graduating class, that can be the brother who can go and use extended family to begin his own great. We are going to be doomed because, again, we have 2 political parties, to do thee and to do done. One we play us off now to be popular because it is the thing to do. But again, at the end of the day, they're not going to do anything. Because for me, I have very great reservations about the man many black folks want to vote for in the coming election. This is a man that wrote the bill that sent our black males in prison. If even we talk about police brutality, we can trace all of that enthusiasm on their part from those bills that this man wrote. This is a man that I can spend the whole week talking about some of the dastardly things that he did, matching with Ku Klux Klan, supporting Ku Klux Klan people in Delaware. Those of us who live close to Delaware and are familiar with the stories of this man know a little bit more than many of our black folks who are too far away. So I am not completely sold. If that is the man I want to vote for, I may go fishing. Because again, the difference between to do and to do and then taking us for granted after we are voted has to stop. It really has to stop. So again, we have to send a message. It may mean we're going to suffer 4 more years, but our own Democratic Party has to get the message to stop taking us for granted. And I don't say this lightly, because those of you who know and you've seen my show on Voice of America TV, I held up my executive member card, pay member card for the National Democratic Party. And I say this because I am trying to be honest. If the Democratic Party was right, this election, our candidate should have been Brother Keith Ellison. Not only is he the most qualified, not only is he the most trustworthy, not only is he the person that have the metal. The reason why they turned over the case of our brother that they murdered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to him was because they know the metal our brother Keith Ellison had. But racism torpedoed him to be the chair of the National Democratic Party, and then they shunted him. He left and went back to say, let me go serve my state. We have to be honest about these things. I did not want to get into the politics because that was not what it is, but we have to say that education also means we have to be politically astute and stop being taken for granted just because we may not like the other guy. So let's vote for somebody that has not done anything for us or has done things that have hurt us more historically than the guy who only talks the talks but has not written any policy, have not enacted any executive order that has hurt me or my people. I have very, very different thinking about this idea as far as I am concerned. But again, at the end of the day, people have to make their choices. That is why we live in a free society. People are free to vote who they want for. So hallelujah. Vote who you want to vote for. But for me, for now, I have to think very seriously whether I should vote or go fishing come November 4th.
he had a follow-up question of, if you would be willing to provide guidance to inexperienced researchers. If so, what would be the best way to contact you?
Well, you said it. It's easy. Just Google the full name, and you get contact information. Nowadays, I don't even travel with cards anymore. I just say just Google cell phone, whatever I have, you get my contact information. Because there are so many things out there on the internet. If you put my name and just put the word email, I'm quite sure you get my email address. But there is a free book for those who are really serious about researching about Africans with a K, and also mentoring their own students, and it's free. Just Google Codesra, Codesria, research handbook. If you just say conducting research and mentoring students in Africa, and it should come up automatically, because I said, interestingly, it is downloaded more by people in Europe and Asia than we want people more. But we are pushing it. Because I'm glad that the University of Cabo Verde, for example, has made it require reading for all their graduate students from master's to doctoral level. Many universities are also doing it. And I'm also glad that some of our universities here in the United States, HBCUs, like Lincoln University, are now making it a reading for their own graduate students. But we have to, Brother Imhotep, we have to, as I said, we have to do better. We have to put the word out. We have to make sure people know, and we have to make our messages more clear. That's why I put it on Facebook. I put these things on LinkedIn. Any media, any medium that I can get the opportunity to put this information out, I put it out there. And so it's a great book, really, and I think, and it's free. That is the good thing about it. You may just have to buy paper and get ink to print the whole book, but it is there. And then the follow-up to that book is coming out soon. It is called Theoretical Grounding in African Research. It is now in press. We hope it should come out in the next 3-4 months. Again, not only should we ground our work when we write about our people methodologically, but we also have to ground it theoretically. And in that book, we cover Eurocentric popular theories, but we also make sure that we cover over 110 African-centered theories. And that is also going to be free of charge. So if the wonderful brother just send me an email, Google, get an email, send it. If you cannot find it, I'll send you the URL to the current book. And when the new book comes out, I'll be happy to send that to you too.
Appreciate that. And this will be the last question. It's coming from Brother Hassan, in all the way in Europe. He says, how do you negotiate Islam with your traditional African culture and spirituality? Are they in conflict or in synthesis?
That is one thing we have also not done a very good job. And we have not promoted the book of the great Ben Buchanan. There's no Islam without Africa. Not only is the origin of Hagar or Hajar an Ishmael African, the prophet himself is African. And when people cringe sometimes, I tell them when I give talks, lectures, public lectures in the Middle East, I said, you Arabs have to be worshiping us Africans. But without us, you would not have this great religion that you revere. And I'll go ahead and show them and then say that if it wasn't for Bilal, the enslaved African who was later freed, that became the first Muslim to the Prophet Muhammad, Islam would have died. If it wasn't the transnationalism of Africans who were brought to the Americas, Islam would not have grown the way it did in Europe, in the Americas, Latin America, South America, you name it. We now have Mexican Muslims. Matter of fact, many of the names are African Muslim names in many of these countries when you go there. So there is really no antithesis between the two. Matter of fact, and that's the point Ben Buchanan made and tried to show that you only can understand African American church spiritual worship when you understand the roots of African syncretism and African worshiping styles. He has taught us many of these things. And we know that when we talk about in the Holy Torah, the Holy Quran, and the Holy Bible, they talk about every life is sacred. Well, we know that this thing did not come from manna from heaven because it was not part of the revelation, but this is part of the tenet. This is part of the teaching. Where did this come from? We know from ancient Kemetian hieroglyphic language is eight, Nisahati, which means that every life is sacred. So again, we cannot just quote the Torah, the Holy Bible, and the Holy Quran and forget that thousands of years before these books were written, the ancient Egyptians were already saying the same thing that entailed these things. And that is what I'm now doing to see how much we have stolen from Kemetian language. Many of the things that are now that have appeared in the Holy Torah, in the Holy Quran, and the Holy Bible. Dr. Yukanin touched on some of the cultural aspects, but then we have to go through to the deep linguistics structures to see that we really cannot talk about these things without the great connections. And people always say, well, African traditional religions, A, B, C, D. Again, what did we do in Africa? We Africanized many of these so-called Western religions. While Africans gave up alcohol and all that, they did not give up the drum in their practices, because this is the African way of celebrating. So you have an Islamic service where people beat the drum. Yeah, we may give up alcohol, we may give up pork, but hey, you cannot take our drum away from us. So you have certain techniques that Africans have used to make sure that their culture, their traditional religions are also preserved. And you cannot really even talk about any of these so-called Western religion without being Africanized, because they are. Many people mix the practices. They go to church on Sunday, they go to mosque on Friday, but come a Saturday or something, they have the African sacrifices where they will put things out and pray to the Creator to make things better for them. And African prayer is very practical. You go to a mosque and a church, people are praying. Matter of fact, in Africa, when it's time to Ramadan, the biggest saying is that, God, give me plenty money. They're not going to say, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. They will say that, but at the end of the day, they say what? Very practical. Give me plenty of money so I can do good things for my family. I can do good things for my neighborhood and my community. And this is the African cultural reality. This is the African worship system they have brought into this religion, that you cannot, it's difficult now to say this is purely the Western religious way of practices. That is gone, and it will never be like that. Africa is going to be front and center in all of this religion, whether they like it or not. Matter of fact, I go to some church services, wedding practices, people jump the broom, they do all this. This is not a Christian way of getting married. These are typical African cultural and religious ways of getting married. So there's no way they are going to get rid of that. This is just reality.
Indeed. Just one follow-up question. Can you put the source and spelling for the free text that the professor mentioned?
For the free text, just say conducting research, and mentoring students in Africa. Conducting research and mentoring students in Africa. Put it in quotation marks so it can take you directly to the link. Conducting research and mentoring students in Africa.
I just put that in the chat for those listening. So those in the chat, I put it in. And if I find the link, if I find the link, I will put it in the description. So for those who are catching the archive and they're listening to this part, they can go directly, saying to it, because it'll be in the description. So I'll make sure that I do that after the program. But I want to thank you again very much for, taking the time out of your busy day to engage my audience. And it's such an honor for me to introduce you to a lot of people who were not familiar with your work. And believe me, that he has a plethora of work in a wide range of topics that, I'm sure you're going to find a few that will suit your interests. So I advise everyone to look into, his works and read up about them and read the text, engage the text, and internalize some of the ideas and methodologies and put them to work and practice. So, I hope I gave this conversation provided you with a good, holistic and overall a greater opportunity to understand our guest and his interests and the works and even future works and ongoing works that he's doing. And so, he's a giant in our community, and, we should, really take seriously the work that he is doing. And more importantly, for those of you on the scholarly track, I would also encourage you to not only study his texts and his methodologies, but to build on them. And so this is an accumulative thing. We build on the researchers who came before us. So, let his dedication and focus and multidisciplinarity and openness to information and his people and his dedication to his people be an inspiration to you, and motivates you to dig deeper and to do more, with what it is that you're doing. So I just like to thank you again for coming, and I'll give you the floor for any last words.
I appreciate the invitation. And if there's any last word, as you are very familiar with my closing, when I send email out, I always say in peace, always. Whatever we do, we have to remember what our ancients taught us, that whatever we engage in, we should do it peacefully and have a great deal of humility in how we proceed. I think that is what has helped me as an individual. And if people have not heard my name or seen my work, maybe I'm just too humble. But again, I prefer to be humble and keep humility than to throw feathers around, because it serves nothing. One gets nothing from a big ego and too much of a pride. That is why I make sure that we always make sure we always bring what our own thought processes are to the plate, even at the face of our own people, not just the other folks, poo-pooing or challenging or not liking what we do. When we did the book on peace paradigms and we did the book on Islamic paradigms, I started thinking, wait a minute, these are great, but we have other African peace paradigms that not only have all of these other paradigms we have, but transcend. So I set out to write a book on African peace paradigms, including our own communal and all other paradigms that we have that the European did not want to touch. They rather come to Africa and superimpose the European way of making peace. They signed this nice document, this nice agreement. 2 months later, Africans are shooting each other again. Why? Because they did not follow the traditional ways of healing. They did not find the traditional ways of bringing peace to community. And believe it or not, we used some of those strategies and they worked. In Cote d'Ivoire, Cote d'Ivoire would have been a bigger mess if we did not bring in the clergy, the imams, and the priests and the pastors to lead their communities into healing when the Muslims were massacred in the south of Cote d'Ivoire. Had that war turned into a religious bloodbath, we would have still been in war today. We used Mato Oput to impress on the government of Uganda, even though they were reluctant at first. Eventually, they bought into it because this is the traditional Ugandan way of bringing people to peace. Now, while Uganda is not completely free, but geez, we have enjoyed some relative calm for many, many years. And there are many success stories we can point to. Whereas our own ways of doing things, if we learn from what our earlier folks do and bring them back and fine tune them to meet current realities, I think we'll do much better as a people than always using somebody's approach because they have the money to give or they have the plane, they have the people, the means to bring us to all these conferences to eat, drink, and talk, sign documents, we go back and start killing each other. So this is my last word. Whatever we do, we should do in peace always.
Indeed, indeed. And again, thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us. And of course, thank all of you who are listening live, and those again who are listening on the archives, both on YouTube and on Facebook. So as always, please continue to support this channel. And, we will continue to bring you, great African thinkers and entrepreneurs and scientists and scholars and just amazing people. And so, I envision this platform that, that it be a space where we can get, deep into various different subjects, but, most importantly, that we are able to give our warriors in whatever endeavor that they are in their flowers, while they are living. And so your support helps, to do that. So thank you all for listening. And for those who, support financially, go out, get a couple of his Dr. Bangura's books, and, let's come back and have a discussion of more, what was discussed in one of those texts. And so, we want to have those as well, those type of discussions where we analyze texts. So, I will, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe and make sure that you hit the little button that lets you know when when I'm doing shows. And so y'all can be up to date on when new shows and things are either uploaded or we're doing a live presentation. So, with that said, Dr. Bangura, if you can just stay on in the green room for a second, I will, for those who need to get in contact with me, here is my social media, as always. And, with that, y'all have a blessed and safe week. Continue to wash your hands, keep social distancing, and staying safe, and continue your studies. So with that said, y'all have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you all later.